WNN by our friends at Royal Farms, real fresh, real fast. Make sure you're downloading the Rofo app when you're pumping your gas. You get your fried chicken and your Western fries free. And don't forget they got that Cloverland eggnog rolling there. It is eggnog season around here, and it's time to celebrate. I am celebrating just having this guy on the program. I've chased him around for a number of years. I don't think we've ever sat in a room together since of my exile from Major League Baseball, but he is one of the great baseball writers in the country, writes for Sports Illustrated. You may know him. I call myself Nostradamus. He is the Nostradamus of all things baseball writers. He is Ben Reiter, and he is the writer who wrote that the Astros would win the World Series way back in the dark ages of 2014 when they stunk, and guys named Mike Elias, who I at one point thought was the Elias Sports Bureau himself, and Sig Mejdal, and I hope I'm pronouncing that properly, along with Jeff Luhnow. He is the author of Astroball, and really, really smart people tell me that I need to read Astroball. I have ordered it. It doesn't come till tomorrow because the overnight thing happens that way. But Ben Reiter, I'm going to have you back on, and I'll hold the book up and tell everyone how much I'm going to love the book, because everybody tells me I'm going to love the book. I think I'm going to love it more now that these cats are really bringing this thing to Baltimore. So, first off, welcome. I hope the book's doing well in the aftermath of the Astros' disappointments this year. But I know you had a lot of blood and sweat on the bricks for the Astros for all of this, and I consider you the highest knowledge I could find anywhere on Mike Elias.
Well, thanks very much for that, Nestor. Thanks for that nice introduction. One thing to correct you on, it's Sig Mejdal.
Mejdal.
I have a feeling that it's a name that people in Baltimore might need to learn. It's Sig Mejdal.
Mejdal, so I can say, I've got sunshine on a cloud. Mejdal. So that's going to be it when we're winning the World Series here?
If that works for you, you should use that.
That's good, man. I want to use that way I can remember it. I'm hooked on phonics here. And, the first thing when my source said to me, Mike Elias, and I started to think, are these the guys that got stolen from, or are they the guys that were the thieves? And, I know the Luhnow thing, and I know your legend with the Astros, but I don't think most Oriole fans who were, looking at Buck Showalter on the wall, or worried about where Adam Jones is going, or where they're trading Manny Machado or Dan Duquette's next deal, are really all that familiar with this. And I know you've written sort of a handbook in Astroball for all of this. But first off, tell us about Mike, and tell us about your fascination with Astroball, because you were fascinated with it and sort of went Nostradamus on it long before it won a world championship, right?
Right. Well, I guess the first thing I would say is that for any Orioles fans who want the full backstory of who these guys are, Mike Elias in particular and Sig Mejdal, what they believe in, the sort of systems they're going to bring to Baltimore, self-promotional here, but should certainly pick up Astroball. They're two of the main characters in the book. You'll get great background on where they came from and the things they're trying to do. It's been heartening to see that this is a decision by the Orioles that has been met with universal acclaim. It's not usually
even by me,
something you associate with decisions made by the Baltimore Orioles, but this one has been, and there's really good reason why. I want to correct the record on one thing about Mike Elias in particular. When his name was being floated for several GM jobs this winter, not just the Orioles, but the Giants, even the Mets, he was often pigeonholed, right? He was pigeonholed as an analytics guy, as a data cruncher, and he's certainly familiar with the most cutting-edge things going on in that world from his time in Houston, from the 7 years he spent working side by side, really, with Jeff Luhnow. The important thing to know about him, though, is that he's coming from the scouting world. He's coming from the world of people. He's coming from the world of traditional player evaluation. He got his first job with the St. Louis Cardinals not long after he graduated from Yale, really. And at Yale, halfway through his career as a left-handed pitcher, he tore his labrum. And at Yale, you can't redshirt. You can't take a redshirt season, stay in school, stay with the team, and come back with an extra year of eligibility. If you want to have that extra year of eligibility, you have to take the season off. Now, even back then, he had the idea that maybe he would become a scout someday. So he spent that season interning for the Phillies, and then he went to work for Tom House, who's the noted pitching guru out in California, working on things like ideal mechanics, working with some of the big league pitchers that came through.
And a lot of football quarterbacks as well, Tom House.
That's right. So he's somebody who from a very young age was focused on this line of work. He was hired by Luno, actually, in St. Louis, not so long after he graduated in 2006. Spent the next 5 years on the road, really, living the life of a scout, staying in bad hotels, eating questionable food, watching hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of players every year and evaluating them from a scouting perspective.
Or as Jimmy Buffett once sang, chewing on Rolaids and battling motel maids, right?
That was his life. He was not sitting in, a computer room crunching numbers.
Long way from Yale, eating pizza somewhere up there in New Haven, right?
That's right. Most of his classmates were, taking jobs at investment banks or going to law school or something. That was not the life that Mike Elias chose for himself.
He didn't choose Wall Street. He chose Camden Street, I guess, right?
That's exactly right. But anyway, one of the players that he really kind of saw and was one of the first scouts to fall in love with was a young Puerto Rican shortstop named Carlos Correa. First saw him when he was with the Cardinals, actually. And then when they went to Houston at the end of 2011, early 2012, they had the number 1 overall pick, and nobody thought that it was going to be Carlos Correa that year. There were a lot of good options out there. Byron Buxton, Mike Zunino, Mark Appel. Elias was really a guy who consistently advocated that they should draft Carlos Correa, shock the world. He was a special assistant to Luno at the time. Of course, they did make that pick, shocking the world, shocking the baseball world, and it seems to have worked out pretty well. So he's somebody who honed his chops in the scouting world, but he does have a great grasp on how to properly blend human-based evaluation with technological evaluation and understand all of the data tools we have at our disposal these days. That's really the theme of Astroball, how the Astros were able to do that in a very revolutionary way. And that's the skill set he's going to be bringing to the top job in Baltimore.
I am going all in on this because one of the smartest people I know has highly recommended Astroball. My wife clicked on the $17.44 online. It is in the mail. It's coming this way. The new way to win it all. The author is Ben Reiter. He is been a frequent visitor around here over a number of years, both before, during, and after the Astros won the World Series. But, dude, I haven't had you on since the book. So now that your guy is our guy, and run me through, give me a little background, because I'm going to recommend the book to everyone. I'm going to be pouring through it here as we get through my turkey and my pumpkin pie this week. I remember the day that Davey Johnson got hired as the Orioles manager. It was harder to find a book, but I found it at the Old Erie bookstore just outside Jacobs Field in Cleveland, the Davey Johnson book by Peter Golenbach, because I was trying to get like some vibe on Davey Johnson when he got hired here back in 1996, 97, and I would think this is a primer. But your background in all of this is like, you're a baseball guy. You sort of bought in on this thing, and we're on the front end of this. Part of your charm and your legacy is having done this Sports Illustrated cover 3 years before they won, and they actually did it. And now you're a little bit of an urban legend on the baseball side because of all that. But you write this book, but you were in on this like years ago. What was it about it that led you to believe personally to stake your name on the front of Sports Illustrated? But more than that, like, when did it become something that you sniffed up that was your own Billy Bean Moneyball thing, that you were going to say, hey, I'm going to go meet these cats from St. Louis that are running this thing, and this NASA nerd scientist guy who's a blackjack dealer, and he's got a story to tell? Because I'm thinking Sid Mejdal, Sig Mejdal, you probably were one of the very few like legitimate media cats that was sort of sniffing around asking him questions, right?
Right. Well, you have to remember, I mean, back in 2014, the Astros were essentially where the Orioles are now. I mean, to be fair, they had never had a season like the Orioles just had. They never lost as many as 115 games. But the 3 previous years, they'd lost 106, 107, and 111. But I knew that the front office was run by guys who had had a lot of success in St. Louis and were very intelligent. Everybody said that. So I was kind of drawn by just how terrible the team was. I wanted to see what was the plan, is there a plan down in Houston? They were called the Disastros. They were called the Lastros. They were throwing up 0.0 ratings on local television, which meant that Nielsen couldn't verify that a single Houstonian was actually tuning in to watch some of these games. So I was really just drawn by the stink, I guess you could say.
Well, welcome to Baltimore, baby. Come on in, man. I got a crab cake for you, Ben.
Well, look, I figured we weren't going to write the story unless we got some sort of unusual access to what they were doing. And after a long period of negotiations, they agreed to give me that really unprecedented access. I was sitting in on their pre-draft meetings as a fly on the wall when they were deciding who they were going to take with the first overall pick in 2014. I sat in the actual draft room. I talked with, dozens of members of the organization, including players and front office people. I came away, obviously, given the cover that came along with it, with the view that not only did they have a plan, it was a very logical one, and it was one I hadn't heard before. Like, yes, they were relying on analytics. They were certainly embracing every way to harness and understand every piece of new data they had. But I thought their real stroke of genius was the way that they were recombining kind of a outmoded source of predicted information, their scouting information, the way that humans could evaluate players, perhaps in a way that metrics couldn't sometimes, the way they're systematically combining those sources of information to lead to the best decisions, and then making those decisions again and again and again. Now, the goal was not to get everything right. It was simply to get marginally more decisions correct than their competitors. That's where they were in 2014. That's what I thought had so much promise, combined with kind of budding nucleus you could see with Altuve. Springer had just come up. Correa was still in the minors, but he was crushing the ball down there. Seemed like they had the makings of something. And if they had enough time, like, say, 3.5 more years, to make enough more good decisions, that it could lead to contention. So that's really what excited me about the Astros, and amazingly enough, that's exactly what happened.
Ben Reiter is our guest. The book is Astroball. It may be called Oriole Ball here sometime soon. And Ben might be moving into my place for crab cakes and a nice view of Camden Yards as it fills up and we win championships. And Sports Illustrated will have this. What year we get? Is that 22 or 23? What year do we get to win, Ben?
Well, I mean, if it were 3.5 years from now, I guess it would be, I'd say, 22 sounds about right.
All right, well, I'm going to have you in here to be a part of all that, but why would we believe? I mean, give me a little... Look, I mean, the glass is always half empty here. I mean, Peter Angelos has owned the team for a quarter of a century. I would think just because the kids managed to recruit these guys, and if they really do sort of stay out of the way, and look, man, you're a baseball guy. You know how involved Brady has been. You know Duquette and Buck didn't speak for years at the end of this thing. You know how they propped Duquette up like weekend at Bernie's all summer long and dealing off all their pieces. You know about the Chris Davis debt. You know Peter's still here. You know there's $400 million of disputed money that 2 weeks from now, that might be a hell of a Christmas gift for the Lerner family. They might wind up getting run into $400 million of Peter's money, but there's a lot of moving parts here. But for the Mike Elias that you know and the Sig Mejdal that you know to sign up for this, these are really, really intelligent men, right? Like, and the first thing is, I would say, if you're this smart, what are you doing here? You know, I mean, that's part of the deal, but part of this, the riverboat in these guys and the blackjack in these guys and the stat nerd in them is they really think they can just come in here and plop this down and do this again, right?
They clearly believe that. I mean, from an ownership perspective, a key in Houston was two things from Jim Crane. One was power, and the other was patience. He gave Jeff Luhnow the power to make these decisions and the authority to make these decisions, as we understand he's given to Mike Elias now. And he also had more patience than probably more sports owners would have with the terrible years that followed as they were building this thing. And that takes confidence and that takes belief. You know, when you are a big person in a city, a pillar of a community in some ways, it's hard when your baseball team loses so badly year after year after year, especially if you have made a lot of money in your life, you're used to results. That's not something that's easy to tolerate. Jim Crane did because he believed in the process that Jeff Luhnow and the people he hired were implementing, and it eventually worked. So that's going to be a key part of this whole venture. I would say that it might be the most key part. Another thing is, why did they take the job? Well, I think that these are two people who are excited by the startup process. They're excited by building something from a 115 loss team into a winner like they did in Houston. And I think that if they have that power to do it, they will be invigorated, not discouraged by everything it's going to take over the next several years to rebuild the farm system, to make prudent decisions in the major league level, and also, frankly, to help to use their techniques and to use data properly to help the players at the major league level, like Chris Davis, who, as we know, probably isn't going anywhere anytime soon, perhaps recapture some of their former levels of performance. That's a big piece of this, too.
You can find Ben Reiter's book anywhere. Writers write and readers read. Out on the interweb, it is Reiter. You can find him out on Twitter and at Sports Illustrated, and with the book and New York Times bestseller Astroball that I am highly recommending. I have bought it. It's coming my way. The new way to win it all. If you want background, sell your book again a little bit here, Ben, on Mike and on Sig, and what a reader can expect to find here as far as background. And maybe this is a good chance for you to tell me about Sig Mejdal, and make sure we're pronouncing that properly. I've watched a few videos and statistical sort of NASA stuff on him, but I don't know that there's ever really been a deep dive on either of these cats that hasn't included you because of the access you've had on this. But these are also guys, they're going to be celebrities here from the day they come as the messiahs and saviors of the franchise, and your book will push that along in the legend. But they are sort of anonymous outside the baseball circles, and the Sig Mejdal story is fascinating as much as the Elias arm problems at Yale stories are, right?
He certainly is. I mean, as for the book, I would argue it is the most inside account of how the most modern of front offices works. So for anybody just on a general level looking to see how front offices in baseball make a decision in this data-deluged world we're in and make good decisions, this is a book for you. Obviously, there are specific parallels with what we can expect in Baltimore, because some of the main characters, the men who are going to be doing it, Sig Mejdal is a particularly compelling character. This is somebody who is a data genius, but is also a humanist, right? When he was in college, he spent his summers working as a blackjack dealer in the worst casino in Lake Tahoe, and he loved it. It taught him a lot about human behavior and about how they don't always go along with what the proper probability suggests they should be doing, particularly at the blackjack table. After that, he went to work as an engineer for NASA. He worked for Lockheed Martin, keeping satellites afloat. This is a smart guy, or I should say keeping satellites in orbit. His dream all along was to work in the area that was his greatest passion since he was a kid, and that's baseball. It's not a place for him when he came out of college in baseball, nowhere close. But after Moneyball came out in the early 2000s, all of a sudden there was. So he sent resumes and proposals around to all 30 front offices. He stood down in the winter meetings in the lobby in New Orleans for several days, 1 year, just trying to get a look from anybody. Nobody responded at all until eventually Jeff Luhnow did and gave him a shot and brought him into St. Louis to kind of teach the organization and instill best practices as far as to how to properly use data to evaluate players, to draft players, and to help players get better on the field, whether that's using specific strategies as far as, swings and stuff, or whether it's managerial strategies as far as how to use shifts. But he's not somebody who is lost in a world of numbers. He is specifically focused on how statistics can help organizations and people improve their real-world performance. That's always been the key for him, and that's certainly what he's going to do in Baltimore, install those best practices while educating the entire organization, really, about their power.
Ben, what was your wow moment in all of this? I mean, you sought it out. You heard about these nerds in Houston with 111 losses that were mixing some science and some stats and some analytics and some scouting, and you went down there. At what point did you start to get overwhelmed? And maybe give a little background about how many of these missions you've been on. I mean, I've been covering sports 34 years myself, and I've had some access here and again to all sorts of things, but I am still overwhelmed, and I've been a baseball fan my whole life by a lot of the Saber nerdity and a lot of the statistics I see and a lot of the wars and things that go beyond wins and losses in the back of the Topps bubblegum card in 1973 when I had a Tom House card when he was a Texas Ranger as well. But in the modern era, young people have sort of come into it. Older people, and I'm 50, grew up with wins and losses and RBIs and ERA and all the basic stats. But the advanced stats and what it's done on the field and how the game looks, how it plays, and all the inherent problems that I think we probably have talked about. And Rob Manfred spends his time talking about how it's changed the game. But what was the wow moment for you when you sort of got in behind the curtain with the Wizard in Oz, right?
It was really sitting in that pre-draft meeting with 40 of their top executives, really, and all the scouts. Nolan Ryan was in there, Craig Biggio was in there, Mejdal was in there, Mike Elias, Jeff Luhnow. For years, we'd heard about how analysts and scouts butted heads all the time, right? These were two antagonistic factors on many teams. The scouts always wanted to do one thing. The analysts wanted to do another. They didn't trust each other. They thought the way that each other wanted to do things was wrong. Frankly, that was not at all the sense of the culture I got in Houston. This was an entirely collaborative, supportive room. Everybody had a voice. Everybody was focused on one goal, which was making the best draft pick possible. Kind of ironically, as it turned out, that pick didn't work out very well. They picked Brady Aiken, the high school pitcher from California, who they did believe in deeply, as I saw in that room, but who they later discovered had some issues with his elbow and they didn't sign. Although in the long run, they actually did work out because with the pick they got in compensation, they ended up drafting Alex Bregman the next year. So that's a pretty good draft pick at the end of the day. But really, it was that cohesiveness, that sense of mission and that vision that I sensed in that room that won me over in some ways, or at least made me believe that the Disastros would not be that way for much longer. And certainly it didn't take very long at all. As you remember, by the next year, this worst baseball team in half a century was in the wild card round and actually the ALDS all of a sudden.
Well, in the football world, we're all real familiar with war rooms and draft strategies and combines and numbers and, all that goes into the NFL process is pretty well known. The baseball side, because the draft isn't this thing that transcends sports and everyone stops and we all give it a weekend and eat pizza and wings and beer and stuff, it kind of comes and goes because these guys don't really come to the big leagues so quickly, and it has to be chronicled 5, 6, 7 years later by a guy like you that goes back and says, what did we do? Hey, I've written a couple books on the Ravens, right? And when you draft John Ogden and Ray Lewis on day one, and then the Ed Reeds and, those kind of players come down the pike, it really does make the difference. But everybody's trying to chase that. The best probability, the best statistics, the best analysis of who's number one, who's number two, and who's number three. Why did they wind up taking Correa? Like, what were the delineating factors that really made it clear in your mind that they had a good idea of what they were doing well before you were writing, World Series winning stories about them 2 years ago?
A lot of it has to do with open-mindedness and with not being afraid to look at each situation individually and from a fresh perspective. Traditionally, there's always these factors that can rule out a player just by themselves, right? Oh, this guy's body is bad. We can't take him. This guy's too short. In Correa's case, one of the factors that turned a lot of teams against him was simply where he was from, Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico has a great baseball tradition, as we know, Nestor, Roberto Clemente, Pudge Rodriguez, Edgar Martinez, Juan Gonzalez, the list goes on and on and on. But in 2012, that had not actually been true for a while. Baseball was down on the island, and it was simply not producing top prospects. So a lot of teams had shifted their sights away from the island and away from players coming there, thinking that, look, good players just don't come from Puerto Rico. Just like people used to think, look, good players just don't come from New Jersey before Mike Trout came out from New Jersey, right? The Astros are very good at making multifactorial decisions, like saying, yes, Puerto Rico, the level of competition he played, et cetera, is one factor in this decision, but it's just one factor. There's a lot of other factors. The guy's physical attributes were extraordinary when he was 17. He was like 6'3" already, but quick at shortstop, kind of looked like a mini Alex Rodriguez. Even something like his character. They spent a lot of time, and this is not something that shows up in any algorithm or in any statistics, investigating who he was, learning from his parents that when he was 8 years old, he went to them and he said, look, I watch these games on TV. After the games, all the Spanish-speaking players, or a lot of them who don't speak English, look awkward in their interviews because they have to do it through a translator or they kind of stumble in English. They look uncomfortable. When I'm a major league player, I don't want to be that guy. I want you to send me to a bilingual school so I can learn fluent English. This is when the guy was 8 years old.
Wow.
His parents didn't speak English. That's the sort of thing that can tell you about what is inside a player more than that means that you should not discount him just based on a single factor. Those are the sort of things that the Astros are very good at and that Mike Elias and Sig Mejdal drove them to be good at and learn from as well, how to take in the universe of information you have to make the best decision you can every time.
It's funny. When I think of the Astros, I always think of Venezuela because I'm Venezuelan, right? And they always had the academy there. They were always sort of front of class. I'm talking 20 years ago, long time ago on the international side. And Altuve being Venezuelan, I mean, they've done it in so many different ways. And I think the one thing we're getting in Baltimore is guys that are real and in it and involved in it and involved in every aspect, and don't have to build much from scratch other than the people around them, because there's no question about what system they're going to run, right? There's no doubt that we're running the West Coast offense here, right? Like, this is the new way. We're going to be on the front end of what is cutting edge. That's how this organization is going to run now, as long as the boys and Brady Anderson get the hell out of the way, right? But these guys wouldn't be signing up here for anything less than doing it this way, and it probably doesn't shock you that they've come another time for a scorched earth thing, and that Elias, much like Theo or any of the rest of these guys, wants to build his own thing, right?
No, these guys are invigorated by the startup type atmosphere. I guess what I would say is there'll be room, presumably, for Brady Aiken too. Brady Anderson too. He has organizational knowledge and, playing history and all sorts of ways that he can contribute. And if he wants to, and they want him to, he'll have a voice as well. Just because they're bringing in this new way doesn't mean that the old ways have to be thrown out. They'll all be incorporated for the greater good.
He is Ben Reiter. The book is Astroball. I would highly recommend you go check that out and check out his work out at Sports Illustrated as well as on Twitter. Does this mean you get to Baltimore more often? I mean, in your mind, does this put Oriole ball on your radar as something, knowing these guys that, I mean, if I give you $1 right now, are you going to put it? You're going to bet on these guys? You come to my blackjack table with Sig Mejdal. Are you of the belief that this system will work here against all the problems with the ownership and the money and the Yankees and the Red Sox? I mean, all of that factors into where they're going to be here. And Chris Davis is coming. I mean, there are a lot of things that are strikes against this franchise, but I think there's a lot to be excited about if you are an Oriole fan.
I think that's right. Look, I think one thing I'll say, I'm not sure I'm in the predictions game anymore, but
you're 1 for 1, dude. Retire.
This move by the Orioles undoubtedly, in my mind, will give them the best chance of success. And it's not going to happen overnight, but a few years down the line, it will give them the best chance of success. And if I'm an Orioles fan, that's what I want to hear.
All right. Well, everybody here wants to hear about Mike Elias and Sig Mejdal and learning the pronunciation of Mejdal. We have learned it's Mejdal, like my girl. So we'll be singing the praises of these guys and singing the praises of your book. Ben, please don't be a stranger and stop by for a real crab cake. We'll make sure you don't get a tourist when you come in to see your buddies here who are going to take us to the promised land and bring the confetti to Pratt Street at some time. You said 2022.
I'll take you up on that, man.
22 or 23? What year are we going to win? What year was that again?
I would think it might be more like 23.
All right, I'll give you an extra year. You get 12 extra months here. Appreciate you, Ben. Thanks for coming on, pal.
All right, later, Nestor.
You got it. Astroball is the book. Please get out there and pick it up. It is come incredibly highly recommended. The new way to win it all. Really a portrait of our new Poobah, Executive Vice President, General Manager, Sig Mejdal, who will be the Assistant General Manager here as well, and how they built it all down in Houston. So there you have it. I've worked hard to get Ben on. Ben's been a good sport. Go buy his book and learn about our new guys. I will be doing that. I already bought the book. Now I got to invest in. How many pages is this book? I don't have it in front of me here. Does it say pages? Hold on here. I'm out on the Amazon thing here. Doesn't it always say like 394 pages? Not that that matters. A lot of pages. It's thick. 272 pages, hardcover, Crown Archetype. It's in English, which I prefer, since it's the language I read. Nasty at WNST.net finds me. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live on our Facebook, as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.